This is King World News. I'm Eric King, and you're about to hear a great interview with two champions of liberty, Congressman Ron Paul and his son, Dr. Rand Paul. Remember to go to our homepage at www.kingworldnews.com for more interviews. Well, this week we have an incredibly important interview with Lord Christopher Monckton, former advisor to Margaret Thatcher. Lord Monckton's speech in the United States on the Copenhagen Treaty has become famous, and you will hear a brief clip of that speech just before the interview. We also have an absolutely riveting interview with Nigel Farage, national spokesman for the UK Independence Party, who gives listeners a glimpse into our future. We also have Dr. Mark Faber of the Gloom, Boom, Doom newsletter, as well as Jeffrey Sout, chief investment strategist from Raymond James. Congressman Ron Paul and Dr. Rand Paul are about to join us in a few minutes. Until then, enjoy these sound bites.
As long as we live beyond our means, we are destined to live beneath our means. And we have lived beyond our means because we are financing a foreign policy that is so extravagant and beyond what we can control, as well as the spending here at home. And we're depending on the creation of money out of thin air, which is nothing more than debasement of the currency. It's counterfeit. And it is a natural, predictable consequence that you're going to have people benefit from it and other people suffer. And those who get to use the money first, like the military-industrial complex, they make a lot of money and they benefit from it.
A study by the Center for Responsive Politics found that you received more money from military members than any other GOP candidate. And the reason I find that fascinating is because you are the only GOP presidential candidate who is calling for the withdrawal of troops from Iraq immediately.
Yeah, sometimes unfairly they challenge us because we take a different position. We take the traditional position that you should only go to war under declaration and win them and get out. And I've taken the position of President Bush when he ran in 2000 of a more humble foreign policy and no nation building. So some people say, well, that's weak for the troops, but it really isn't. It's protecting the troops. I want them to come home. And the fact that we get the money from the military more than all the other Republicans put together is a pretty darn good endorsement. And I've been in the military. I've been in 5 years, so I believe in a strong national defense. It's just that I have a disagreement on the foreign policy.
We have a national ID card on our doorsteps. It's being implemented right now. We have FISA courts. We have warrantless searches. We've lost habeas corpus. We've had secret prisons around the world, and we have torture going on. That's un-American. But, just going for increasing presidential powers, as been discussed, is rather disturbing to me. This whole idea that we're supposed to sacrifice liberty for security, we were advised against that. Don't we remember that when you sacrifice liberty for security, you lose both? That's what's happening in this country today.
The establishment in our high-rise penthouse views laughs at you. They laugh at us. But you know what? They're not laughing.
I think there's a disconnect between the Republican primary voter who does believe, like myself, in limited constitutional government and our leaders who have sometimes let us down.
This is the largest deficit we've ever had in our history. The money supply went up in the last 6 months greater than at any time in our history. The repercussions of what we are doing will be profound. But how does the Constitution come into play? The Constitution doesn't allow for most of the things they do in Washington. Probably 80 to 90% of what goes on in Washington is unconstitutional. The Constitution enumerated certain powers. Those powers not enumerated, meaning those powers not named, are to be left with the people.
If I am elected to the U.S. Senate, I will introduce legislation that says you cannot consider any legislation that you have not read. I pledge, if I go to Washington, to vote against any budget that's not balanced.
Joining us now are Congressman Ron Paul and his son, the future Senator of Kentucky, Dr. Rand Paul. Let me start off asking the two of you about a Rasmussen poll that was just conducted. Reported 71% of the people in the country are angry at the government. That is a number that is extraordinary. People feel that their future is slipping away for both them and their children. Could the two of you comment on this recent poll, starting here with Rand?
Well, I think it is definitely going to be the year of the outsider. The Tea Party movement's huge, and that same poll actually showed that the Tea Party movement, the mythical Tea Party movement, outpolled the Republican Party. So, yeah, I think there's a lot of discontent in the country with big government, and I think there's never been a better year for an outsider to run for office.
Congressman Paul?
Yeah, and I certainly agree, but I think that we have to be careful about one thing. I think almost everybody's angry, even maybe more than the 70%. But they're not all of the same philosophic position. We who have been fighting for limited government and for individual liberty, and we don't want our taxes to go up and we don't have to subsidize those who don't work, they've been around for a long time. But right now, the system is coming unglued. Everybody knows it can't continue with these deficits exploding. Next week, the House will be passing an increase in the national debt of $1.9 trillion in 1 year. This is just unbelievable. But the people on the left, the people on the receiving end of this, whether it's the rich recipients or the poor recipients, whether it's the military-industrial complex or whether it's the people who just want more welfare, they're getting nervous because they know that this is getting risky. Young people, I have found out today, are so upset because they're getting a mess handed to them. They know it's harder to get jobs. They know about the tax system. They know that Social Security is insolvent. So there's a lot of justification for this anger. The greatest part about this is they've directed their attention toward Washington, and that is very important. Of course, I've been personally pleased because they're also directing their hostility toward the Federal Reserve.
Congressman Paul, I find it so fascinating, the youth of the nation who is indoctrinated repeatedly and habitually with this propaganda, that you're making the greatest ground with them. And so is Rand. I just find that fascinating. Is that a surprise to you in the end?
Yeah, it really has been, but it's very, very pleasing that a lot of the young people come and tell I energize them and motivate them, but they motivate me. And I guess the day I discovered it, and I mentioned that in my book, is when we had a huge rally at the University of Michigan in Ann Arbor after one of the debates, and there were 5,000 out there, and that's when they started chanting about the Fed, and I said, I didn't even know they knew anything about it.